Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Second week of May, everybody. Some of you attended graduations last week. Hopefully, you enjoyed your Mother's Day if you're a mother. Memorial Day is upcoming. Some of your pools have already opened. But of course, the thing I'm most excited about is Mental Health Awareness Month. These allergies are still wearing me out. So, yes, I'll be in my glasses for the next few weeks because my eyes are boycotting my contacts. But we're going to work through it. So, as we're talking about our vision and seeing things, we're going to see ourselves on to some healthy wellness strategies as we get into the podcast for this month. Last week, we were talking about our sleeping patterns and trying to make sure that we were on track with wellness and good sleep hygiene. And this week, we are talking about our financial patterns. I know that last month was Financial Fortitude Month, but financial wellness is always on the table. And since we're talking about our wellness strategies, we know that financial wellness is absolutely connected to mental wellness. So let's get into it. I have referenced probably multiple times on here in just my shopping addiction. And I am one of those people who was literally not taught to have a healthy relationship with money. And it is not that I was modeled for me to have an unhealthy relationship, but nobody ever really sat down with me and talked to me about a budget. My mother, she balanced the checkbook down to the absolute penny. She was a very good steward of her money, but that didn't necessarily translate over to financial skills with your children if you're not intentional about sharing that. I think a lot of times in that generation, people thought you would pick things up because they did it, but that wasn't the case. My father, on the other hand, he was a spender and he was a hustler. So he was going to find a way to make sure that he had the money, but it wasn't necessarily always healthy ways. And he always told me that if I needed something to ask him, don't go to a man and ask for it, which is probably why I don't ask men for things very frequently, but that's a podcast for another day. Anyway, so let's get into this financial wellness piece. And a lot of times people ask me, so what is financial wellness exactly? Financial wellness is about understanding how to manage your money in those ways that will allow you to be financially stable, fiscally wise, and how we're allocating our resources. Because as you know, there are always going to be opportunities for things that need money in order to make them happen. And that can be in our present, but also the decisions that we make financially in our past affect our present, and they most certainly affect our future, as do our present decisions affect our future. And if you've ever had more debt than you were able to really be able to pay off, so you're now paying a lot of interest on that debt, you pay for that debt two and three times. It might have been a foreclosure, file bankruptcy. You may have gone to one of those check advance cashing places, taking out one of those high interest loans. You know that those poor financial decisions will come back to haunt you. You might be a person that's been on Klarna or PayPal, and you're doing these payments, and then you realize, like, I've racked up four, five, $6,000 worth of debt. I don't have the type of money to be able to pay this off and be able to manage the other things. And then because we have multiple opportunities to be able to get credit, care credit, I know took a lot of people out trying to pay for braces and dental work. Seemed like a really great opportunity. Hey, insurance is only paying for a portion of these braces. Let me go ahead and put this on care credit. They were pushing those care credit applications really hard. But then when I look around, now I have multiple high level balances on these cards. And as you well know at this point, when you have more than 20% on that credit card of the utilization of your total amount that you can charge, then it starts to affect your credit. Yeah, come on, talk to me about it, right? And so we know that credit can determine our ability to be able to access housing. It can affect our ability to get transportation. employment, clearance. Some people have federal jobs, state jobs, and what are they doing now? They're checking your credit score. They're looking to see what your debt to income ratio looks like. They're looking to see how you manage money. If you have a history of poor fiscal decisions, it can affect your ability to go to college or pay for some educational classes, your investment opportunities. We know that real estate is where it's at, but oftentimes we don't have enough capital in order for us to be able to get real estate or even be able to get business loans because we have not great credit and we don't have other resources available. And if you've ever been in a relationship, you know that finances is one of the major reasons why oftentimes relationships don't work out because people have different spending patterns. I didn't know how much debt you had when we got into this relationship. Now I'm realizing we have to figure out how to pay this debt. However, I might be a person who has a good fiscal plan. You still out here spending. So I'm trying to pay off the debt, you running up the debt, and then we're not making any progress. So, what we've come to find is that people with fewer resources tend to have a habit of spending more of their income on the things that don't have long term value. And that is because frequently people are trying to do what? Make ends meet. And so I'm buying what I need at the time. And that's not to say that, because I know that there is a stereotype, particularly in lower income communities, that, oh, if you weren't spending so much money on shoes, buying those Jordans or clothes or getting your nails and hair done. But truth be told, like across ethnic groups, there's not a lot of variation in how much people are spending on clothing items and cosmetics and electronics, decor, accessories, those things. What ends up happening is we often are in a situation where we're making less money and we have less financial resources. So every little bit matters. And so we are struggling to be able to just have equitable access to resources. And so I want to talk a little bit about why we're not in a better position than our grandparents were, many of us, because even though we're making more money at our jobs, we're still not making progress. That wealth gap, there's still a huge divide in it, particularly between people of color, and there's a lot of reasons for these trends, right? But we're going to talk about why we often, I make the joke, like when people are stressed about money, they spend money, right? Like you've seen those memes. Of course, I'm stressed about money, so I'm going to spend it. So this is some of the reasons why we end up spending when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed out, why we use money as a coping mechanism, and how this contributes to why we don't necessarily have the best relationship with money. Yes, there is absolutely an endorphin rush. When you are under stress and you purchase something, people talk about how good they feel when they see those packages come in, that thing you ordered, even clicking that button, purchasing something. It makes us feel like we have some semblance of power. It gives us a feeling of elation at the time. Now, it is a passive coping mechanism because it doesn't address the thing that's causing me stress. But does it feel good, at least temporarily? Yeah, it does. We also know that some of the time we don't have good relationships with money because things cost way more. So now we're experiencing a lot of inflation. So the things you all may remember during the pandemic, how expensive Lysol got, how expensive wipes got, how expensive sanitizer got, and people were trying to make cleaning products and offer alternatives. We were going back to being able to use that good old peroxide because it was cheap. But there are a lot of things that never went back down. So now we're paying more for goods and services. We definitely are paying more for housing. And we're paying more interest to get the same amount of money borrowed. And so that inflation is really wearing people out because guess what? What didn't go up that much, or didn't go up comparably, is our salaries. So there are a lot of people that don't even have a livable wage. We have a lot of people that I won't even say are living check to check because oftentimes people are not even making it from one check to another check, and you're seeing people work multiple jobs. And what happens is when we have sustained financial stress, we do tend, it affects our relationship with money. It affects how we are able to progress long term. When people are in prolonged poverty, that definitely can affect how you look at money, how you address financial issues, right? And so what do we do when we have lack? We are trying to make ends meet, trying to make things work, sacrificing. When we have some things, it's like, okay, well, let me buy some things now because I don't know when I may have resources again. And so often that is when you'll see people like, hey, I've needed a car. Let me go ahead and get that car because now I'm getting that income tax return. Let me go ahead and pay up my rent because I've, got a little extra money, or let me move out and get an apartment. Let me move out of a situation where I may be living with other people into my own space. And we think like, okay, I pay it up, put a few months on it, and I should be able to sustain it. But then I, again, haven't changed any of my other habits. And so now I'm still struggling. So I'm back in that situation where a few months in, 6 months or so, sometimes less in, now I'm back in the same financial stress that I was before, trying to figure out how I'm going to maintain this, right? So that leads to not accurate financial guidance or advice about how to manage savings, how to deal with when you have to dip into those savings. You're not able to save in the way that you want. We think that debt is money, and it really isn't. Y'all remember them college credit cards and how they would target schools and tell you to get these credit cards and low interest, and you'll be able to use this for books and other things. And if you don't have your financial aid hasn't come in, right, and it's specifically targeted institutions where there might have been people of color who are in situations where they might have needed that financial aid, counted on that. And so, hey, this credit card to kind of float me in the interim. But also, people will talk to us through multiple streams of income. You all have definitely gotten text messages, emails, people propositioning you about getting in these multi level marketing kind of opportunities, and then it doesn't pan out for you in the way that you thought it would. So hey, okay, I'll make money off other people as they come in, but people aren't necessarily following through. They're not being successful in that. It's not turning over in the way that I thought. And so now I've invested this money, but I haven't seen a return on my investment. All of us have gotten bad financial advice before, right? You might have invested in something. You might have went in on some real estate or property with someone only to find out that you were scammed, or to find out that it wasn't actually anything that was going to make you money. And now you're in a situation where you've got this house that you cannot sell for the price that you purchased it for, and it's got all these issues. So now what am I going to do with this? So what does that do? It creates mistrust. And there may be mistrust that comes from family members because of bad information, but also some of us are in situations where parents weren't honest with us about financial situations. So maybe some credit was started in your name. Maybe some relatives got you some bonds or something that you were supposed to be able to have, maybe an account for you to be able to pay for college or get a first home, and then you find out that it's been used and there isn't any money in there. Maybe there have been friends and family who had loans that they didn't pay back to you, or that you co-signed on something and they didn't follow through with the payment, so that's affected your credit. Or we all know how it can happen after a funeral and people leaving resources, or how things are going to be distributed and how that can go left. And so there is that generational mistrust that ends up happening. And I definitely think that people in situations who are trying to just manage the right now are not really in a position to fund retirement as adequately as they would like to. I was just in a workshop and all of us were like, we supposed to have how much saved up? Oh, okay. Right. So we're getting a little nervous about, okay, well, that's not necessarily in the place that I want it to be. And particularly for people that may be business owners where you don't have someone paying into your retirement, or you haven't retired from a career where you already have your retirement covered, are just trying to figure out, okay, well, I'm trying to pay bills. I don't necessarily have as much money to put in a retirement, and these investments are not necessarily as fruitful because I don't have as much money to be able to put in there. We also just tend to have, I think, passive coping skills when we're dealing with anxiety and depression. Don't get me even started on the sleep issues we talked about last week. And when we're dealing with these things, like, we have financial stress that comes along with that. So it's not like we deal with them in isolation. It's like, hey, all of this stuff is going on, and I need to figure out how I'm going to pay for this child to be involved in this sport, or I really want them to be able to take this trip. I want them to be able to have this opportunity to go to this program, trying to figure this out. How am I going to fund their college, or how am I going to fund this summer camp for them, or their daycare? And so what are we using? We're using shopping. Like, and it may not be big things. Like, most of the time, people aren't spending these large amounts of money, but it is money that isn't necessarily, again, being fruitful. So like, yeah, I might just pick up a couple of items from the dollar store to put a little decor around the house, might make me feel a little better. I might, I see like, oh, they've got those shirts for $10. I don't necessarily need one, but that's a really good price. I'm going to go ahead and get them. I'm going to get those towels because they're on sale right now. Right. But those are the things that we do because we're like, how we have all this stress and I don't really know any healthier ways to be able to manage it. And we can't ignore the impact of systemic racism and how family wealth has been destroyed or stolen. Access to resources to be able to maintain family wealth was denied, delayed, or significantly lower than what was asked for or needed. And so we know that this has created some of these intergenerational wealth issues in families. We know that not everybody is in a situation where they have an inheritance or able to get financial assistance or gifts from family, such as a down payment for a home or being able to have some resources to be able to make sure that your school is covered. We know that one of the biggest expenses that people will have is housing. And so, for people that aren't in situations where they can get that benefit of someone to be able to help out, hey, I'll pay your first 6 months, I'll pay your first year while you're getting on your feet, then trying to figure out housing can be very challenging. And so, when housing is taking up a majority of your income, it doesn't leave a lot of other resources left. And so, hey, I want to be able to, I'm working hard, I might even be working a few jobs. So, I want to be able to do something fun sometimes with my money too. And so, this is how we sometimes can get in those places of being able to spend as a mechanism for coping. But also, there is this phenomenon called status signaling. And you have not necessarily heard that term, but you understand the context of it, that looking the part. You probably grew up in households where there were at least some conversations or schools, or maybe there's mentors or church that talked about you needed to be able to look a certain way to get access. You needed to dress a certain way in order to be taken seriously. When you go for that loan, you need to make sure that you are dressed in a business attire. When you go to get that job, you want to dress like where you want to be, what you want to move up to. And so a lot of times for people, attire is an important part of them being able to spend money because they want to make sure that they're having the opportunity to be able to get access, to be looked at, to be considered. Because a lot of times we will ascribe a certain amount of characteristics to a person based on their physical attractiveness, but also how they dress, right? Their attire, their whole look that they are bringing into a space. And so for a lot of particularly people of color, then that is something where they're going to want to put some resources. All of these things can be looked at as the impact of financial trauma. And financial trauma can be an experience you had or experience you observed in your life in which you saw that someone was negatively impacted with regard to how they were able to access money, their relationship with money, or how money was utilized in their life or used as a mechanism of control. And so often we're in those situations where I think I've shared before, when I was in, so you kids have middle school, I had junior high. When I was in junior high, I distinctly remember being in, no, I wasn't in junior high, I was in sixth grade. I was in sixth grade, and I distinctly remember having a conversation with one of my classmates. It was following Christmas. And she said, oh, what did you get for Christmas? And I was so excited. I listed out, I had two pairs of pants, I got like a sweater, I think I got a pair of shoes, and maybe because I'm a kid, always at heart, probably got some kind of stuffed animal, some kind of toy, something I was excited about. And so, you know how you're writing notes in class. And so she came back and her list just said clothes. She didn't list out individually her clothes. And what she said to me, and I don't think she was intending to be snide in this way or to make me feel bad, like, oh, I didn't list all my clothes. I just put clothes. That would have been too much to list. And so I became very aware that financially I was in a different category than a lot of the other people that I was in school with. And so, you know, I was that kid that had that couple of pair of pants that you rotated, change up your shirt, have those same couple of pair of jeans that you're wearing over and over again. And so for me, being able to access clothing became a big part of an identity for me because that was related to my financial trauma around feeling as if I had little. I remember, having holes in jeans, but still having to wear them because that's what I had. Outgrowing things, still having to wear them because that's what I had. People had multiple pairs of shoes. I had one pair of shoes. So if something happened to that pair of shoes, then oh well, right? I had school clothes and I had play clothes, but the play clothes were just the school clothes that had gotten too worn, too raggedy to wear to school. And so for me, because I saw that lack around being able to have, that was adequate, but it felt like it was limited. And it definitely felt different than other people. And so it affected part of how I dress now, and why I care so much about my appearance and why I have so many items of clothing and so many shoes, right? Because I didn't have it then. And that was something that was an insecurity for me that I felt bad about. And it felt as if I was in a situation of poverty. And so, not wanting to feel like that, regardless of where the money is, then what I'm going to make those allocations and those resources for clothing. So, as we talked about last week, it's very important to have a wellness plan in whatever area that you're trying to, ensure that you have a better capacity for mental overall wellness. So, financial wellness plan is going to consist of a lot of different things, and it is going to depend on those things I listed as potential factors that could be influencing your relationship with money, but it also is going to depend on your family of origin, your current relationship with money, your current financial resources. So there are a lot of things. So I'm going to give you some stuff, but as per usual, I want you to make sure that as you're thinking about your financial plan, that you're tailoring it to yourself, and what you need. And you may think of some things that I didn't cover because, of course, I can't cover everything, and you want to add that to your plan. But there is a such thing as financial counseling. So even outside of mental health counseling, you can have financial counseling where you're working with a financial planner. You may be working with a financial coach. You may be at Goodwill, at their career center. So there are a lot of different options. There are a lot of free resources. There are resources for people wanting to start businesses. So you have several things that you can take advantage of. But the financial counseling allows you to explore whatever beliefs you have and behaviors you have around money. And that may look at times in your life where you haven't had enough money, where there's been a lack, scarcity, if you will, how you make decisions about your money. And that is things like, okay, this inflation is out of control. I'm not making any more money, but things are costing more. So, how am I going to manage that? How am I going to take control of my debt? How am I going to minimize my debt? How am I going to get to the point where I'm preventative and not causing myself to have a lot of debt? What kind of financial goals do I want to set for myself? How am I going to budget my money? Right? Because we talk about that every dollar should have a place. So it shouldn't be that I just have money lingering around like, oh, I got some extra money. For those of you who check your account, that's my financial anxiety. I pretty much check my bank account daily. So when you're looking at that account and you see a little extra money, one, I think a lot of times people don't remember that they have outstanding checks and there's some money that's coming back. But two, I think a lot of times people don't remember, like, oh, there's going to be something coming out at this point because I don't have a budget and I don't have things written down. So being able to really understand that all this money has a place. So there isn't any free floating money out there. I have my money for travel. I have my money for investment. I have my money for savings. I have my money for housing. I have my money for food, right? So if everything has a place, then I can know truly what my budget looks like and not overspend. And that's how some of us get in trouble because we'll think, oh, I have the money for that. And then next couple of days, we're getting a insufficient funds notification because I forgot about this bill that was going to be coming out because it's only once a year or it's quarterly. And I forgot that it's time for that membership to renew. But I think it's also important for us to have that plan if you're looking to own a home. If you have multiple properties and you're trying to manage real estate, if you're trying to figure out how can I do this multiple streams of income that it actually is giving me money to be able to supplement my main job and also be able to fund my retirement. Being able to figure out how I'm going to send the kids to daycare, some of us, and then some of us are in a situation where you're trying to send kids to college, or there is some kind of health issue, because now we recognize, like, at some point in your life you may end up having to be out on leave for a health issue, and you may only be getting a quarter of what you usually get, or you may be in a situation where you don't work, you don't get paid, so you don't even have any supplemental money coming in from a disability policy. And so thinking about that, and also emergency fund, like, yeah, when we need some tires, what if we need a roof, what if there's some dental work that we need to get done, right? So being able to manage those things too. Car repairs. So financial counseling can allow you to be able to understand how to navigate that. Life events, birth of a child, death of a child, God forbid, marriage, divorce, right? The beginning and the ends of things, because that's part of life. When I have a hardship, maybe I get laid off. How am I going to manage that if I get laid off? What if there's some downsizing? Companies will hire a bunch of people, and then next thing you know, they'll be downsizing, and then now all of a sudden I'm out of a job. What happens is I get to be a certain age, and where it may be a little bit harder because there's some little age discrimination, or maybe I've got some physical ailments that stop me from being able to work in the same way. Maybe my work is really hard on my body, and so I have to be thinking about doing some other things which could affect my amount of income. And so financial counseling can allow you to be able to navigate all of those different things. And then, because you know you're going to get a plug for mental health counseling during Mental Health Awareness Month, being able to talk about things such as boundaries, because sometimes we're incurring more debt because we don't have the best boundaries. We don't have the best boundaries with ourselves and our spending. We don't have the best boundaries with other people. We're trying to kind of keep up with other people, and so we're living outside of our budget, because we're dealing with some financial trauma, or maybe we grew up in an environment and we're still trying to mirror that environment in which we grew up in, and we don't have the same level of resources. Like, I'm looking at my parents and how I feel like they were balling out by my age, and so I want to be able to balling out. That's two different circumstances, two different times in the United States. And so what's going on now may not be. And again, we talked about, like, our grandparents actually had more resources. Our parents might have had more resources than we do because we're navigating different things. They also didn't have as much debt as we have. And so am I out here living outside of my means? And so I'm creating this environment where I'm having to work hard and work these multiple jobs. Am I in a career path that isn't allowing me to grow? It's temporary. Some of us are doing work that's contractual, and so what happens when that contract ends? And so I no longer have those resources. And so being able to ensure that I have good cognitions around my abilities, my ability to make decisions, my abilities to be able to know what my worth and my value is, being able to navigate that in a workspace. A lot of times we'll take whatever people give us. We don't negotiate our salaries. We don't feel like we should. I should be just happy that I got a job. What happens when I've been on this job for a while and I haven't gotten a raise, or I want to do some things different, and being able to have that assertive communication and address those things? Mental health counseling can help with that. Looking at active, healthy coping as opposed to the avoidance based coping that shopping usually comes with, replacement behaviors for that. So when I'm up at night dealing with that anxiety, I can't sleep, that depression, I just got laid off. People will get laid off and go spend a bunch of money, right? Because they're so stressed out about the fact that they got laid off. So it's like, well, I'm going to go have a good time. Instead of me thinking, okay, do I want to take that money and invest in a job search? Do I want to take that money and put it up and save it because I know that I'll be without a paycheck for a little while? Do I want to take that money and invest in a headhunter, right? There's so many different things that I could look at, but I need to be able to understand why I'm triggered to shop in the first place, so I can instead do something that's going to help my situation and not make it worse. That's that self sabotage piece. And we'll find ourselves. How many of you have paid off a debt, gotten yourself to a point where you're debt free, and then what do? You run that debt right back up. And being able to understand that pattern, being able to see that I am in situations where I'm setting myself up to fail because there's a part of me that doesn't really feel like I'll ever be in a position to be able to manage my money in a way where I'm not dependent on credit or dependent on someone else. And I think a lot of times, and that's the piece of dealing with the relationship component and, attachment, the dependency. Some of us are dependent on other people, thinking that we're not able to take care of ourselves. So we never set ourselves up to be able to be independent and allow ourselves to reach our fullest potential because, again, we have these negative cognitions about our abilities, our worth, and our capacity to be able to be producers, our capacity to be able to generate wealth instead of having to be dependent on someone else and living in that cycle. So, you are meant to be a lender, not a borrower. Be well.